Hey, welcome to the Silver River Chairs channel. We'll be assembling a stool frame and then weaving it with 1-inch shaker tape. For the frame itself, you're going to want a rubber mallet, ideally. Some kind of hammer would be great. We're going to use some wood glue to put it together and a brush to brush the wood glue on. For the weaving itself, 1-inch shaker tape. You'll need about 5.5 to 6 yards of each. We like to do a piece of 1/2-inch foam. For the weaving aspect of it, some needle-nose pliers can be helpful, as well as a screwdriver. It's not a necessity. You can do it with your hands. The only other thing is when we're assembling, you might want a damp washcloth to wipe off any excess glue. So these stool frame kits have directions on the front here, but we're going to go through it step by step. So the posts have holes drilled on 2 sides. The first rails we're putting in are going to be the short rails on the holes that are closer to the top side. So that's the first thing we're going to do. You're going to set them up kind of as mirrored pairs here. So you want to put a little bit of glue in the hole as well as on the rail. And you're not trying to fill the hole by any means. A little bit of glue in each one. And then with a brush, swirling that around in the hole itself. And then using what's excess and putting a little bit of glue on the end of the rail. And I'm going to line this up and just kind of push a little bit. Do the same. So when you're hammering these in, you want to make sure that they get hammered in all the way. You also want to make sure that the long ends of the posts are on the same side. If there's any extra glue, just wipe it up with a damp washcloth. Two H-frames assembled. The short rails are in the top holes. Put the long rails in, connect the 2 ends together. So when you go to put these together, you want to make sure that the long ends of the posts are all pointed in the same direction. Otherwise, you get a pretty wonky stool. Okay, stool is all the way together, but a lot of times a little bit of wonkiness. Then take the bottom and kind of pull those together a little bit until it doesn't rack anymore. Kick one leg off the edge of the table and push down on it. The stool sits level. And if you want to paint the frame or oil it or put any color on it at all, now's the time so that you don't mess up your shaker tape later on. Might want to leave these top rails the way they are, but you can paint the bottom ones. Using a piece of masking tape, and go across the shaker tape so it forms a T, and then underneath and tape it onto the rail like that. Then you're going to take the roll and wrap around, ideally without getting any twists. and it's easier to wrap with the roll so that you can keep it untwisted. When you're wrapping, you want to leave it loose so that you can fit foam in. Starting with the tape, and we're going to pull tension by pulling toward myself. And you don't want to pull real tight, just a little bit tight, taking all the slack out, but not really pulling it super tight. And you don't want them to overlap at all. You want them to sit right next to each other, but no overlapping. Once you've pulled tension, you'll notice that at the bottom, everything is a little bit at an angle. So we're going to put some tape here on the opposite rail from where we started. It's a little tricky because there's foam in the way and there's other material in the way. Now that we have the warp on that's wrapped around the rails, we're going to weave with the weaver or the weft. First thing you want to do is to tie it to the rail here. And I'm making a loop and then putting the tail through. Just tight enough so that it'll stay put. Unroll this guy and weave through. And we're going to do a checkerboard pattern. So it's over and under each strand. Over and under. And over and under. Make sure that when you start, you've gone over the rail and you're over the rail on this side as well. Now I'm just going to pull all this slack out. Pull it tight, squish those guys up, and then go over and under on the bottom side as well. Include this one for now, but when you get toward where the tape is, you'll start to ignore it. The next row on the top, I'm going to go the opposite to the way that you wove last time. So I was over this one, I'm going to go under it. And it's still every single one going over and under, over and under. Pull that tight and squish these guys as close together as you can. Now you can see the checkerboard pattern starting to happen. On the bottom, you're going to do the same as the top, weaving opposite to the last row. Here's where we taped off the warp strand here, and we've gone over it up to this point because you couldn't really get under it. Now is the first time when I can get under that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And on this side, it is a little tight. This might be the last time I can get underneath this one where we've taped it on the rail to start out. So it looks like I've got space for 2 more rows here, and it's getting pretty tight. So I'm going to use my hands and bump these guys over and squish them together really tight so that it gives a little more space to weave through. Be patient, it gets tight at the end. So up until now, I've been doubling up so that the shaker tape doesn't get twisted. Because it's so tight, it'll be easier to weave with just a single strand. So make sure it's not twisted and then start weaving through. So notice if it starts to fray, it's helpful to put a little piece of masking tape on the end. And also here at the end, it can be helpful to have a ramp. So using a ramp, and as you're pushing the material through, it kicks up onto the ramp. And you can use a ramp through the whole process if you want to, but for the most part with this 1-inch tape, it's not too bad to do with your fingers. Ooh. If you're having trouble, you can grab onto the material with needle nose pliers. For this last row, I'm going to weave exactly the same pattern as I did on the previous row. And it's nice because you can just kind of slide it on top of the material. Okay, pull that tight. So this was our last row, and I'm moving these strands over so that I can weave the first row back in. It'll make life a little easier. Okay, now you can untie the knot, weave this row the same pattern as the row there. If you have a little extra space on the rails, it looks nice if you can to kind of space the shaker tape out so that there's not one big gap, but a lot of small gaps. Eventually it's gonna, as you use the stool, it's gonna find its own equilibrium anyways. All right, all done. Now these are footstools. They are not step stools. They're not for standing on or sitting on. Stuffed animals can sit on them just fine, but they're not for humans to sit and stand on. This particular project is a great beginner project, but we teach all levels. Now we do have stool kits available here in the shop if you want to try this on your own. Thanks for watching the Silver River Chairs channel.